to compare Joe Burrow to some other guys across the league. Let's start with Tua Tagovailoa. What do you think?
It's Joe. They're 1-0 head-to-head. He's got the better completion percentage, more passing yards per game, more pass touchdowns, more rushing touchdowns. I mean, like you look at all the stats, it's there. But I'm also with you in terms of like, who do I think I want on my team if I'm trying to get the win? Yeah. And it's going to be Joe B.
And the thing is, I mean, this is no disrespect to Tua, because I think Tua is very good as well. But he needed the coaching change to kind of reach his full potential, right? Joe walked into a Bengals organization that had been a joke for a very long time, and immediately they're in the Super Bowl a couple of years later.
And Tua can't play in cold climate. He's proven that in the postseason. That's why they can't get past certain rounds there because he can't play in cold weather.
But to be fair, though, both of these guys
it was a little cold, but he has a history of not being able to play. Both of these guys got
the same issue, though. They're both ouchie guys. They both like to get hurt. So that's a knock on both of them.
All right, how about Joe Burrow versus Brock Purdy here?
Oh, this one was a little bit more difficult as I started to dive into it because I feel like because Brock Purdy's a winner, right? Like, we know Joe Burrow's a more talented player, but Brock is a winner as well. However, the edge is still going to Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
1-0, head-to-head, and we can go through the stats. It's pretty split, but I like Joe Burrow versus Brock Purdy in this scenario.
And look, guys, I'm trying my best, okay, to be objective here, but I have bias. Unlike Brooke, I'm not going to be scared of showing my bias. This is easily Joe Burrow. And
easily?
I don't think it's easy.
Let's do a thought experiment. What happens if Joe Burrow's on the Niners? How good is that team? You don't think that team's like all of a sudden intimidatingly good Super Bowl favorite good?
There's so many haters for Brock Purdy. If Brock Purdy was taken in the first round or in a higher round, I think we would be putting more respect on his name.
It's
like because he's Mr. Irrelevant.
We're acting like... And I'm going with Joe on this, but we need to have a real conversation. I've not really seen Joe look like that without Jamar Chase. It's true. Yes. That's 100% the truth.
Those weapons.
Okay, so we could do the flip-flop the quarterbacks thing, and I think anybody looks good throwing it to Jamar Chase. I think people look really good when they're playing in Kyle Shanahan's system. Like, I think both things can be true. Jimmy Garoppolo had that team playing pretty well. Like, I'll give you that. But I think if you put a good quarterback with the Bengals right now, they're going to look like a good quarterback.
I think Joe Burrow has the slight edge here, but I don't think it's like that big of a
T-Bob's over here talking about some. I don't know why y'all are thinking about this.
Look, I'm with Cam Newton. Joe Burrow ain't no game manager. And that ain't even, I'm with Cam. That's not a disrespect. That's a style of play. But Joe Burrow ain't no game manager.
Okay, this one's really interesting for me. I think this is going to be a close one. Joe Burrow versus Josh Allen.
It's not close. This one is actually further away than Brock Purdy for me.
Interesting.
Josh Allen turns the ball over too damn much. He's a little bit erratic with his arm. If we're going to talk about some game managers, they kind of turned him into a game manager by the end of the year when Joe Brady hopped in there as coordinator.
Yeah.
Both of those guys work with Joe Brady. That's interesting. But what I will say is, when it comes to a guy, I feel like you want to have the win. Show me his marquee wins, because I feel like Josh Allen's narrative is driven by having marquee losses and not marquee wins. That's number one. Number two, protect the football in the big game. Joe will do it. Josh Allen can't trust him.
Protect the football, absolutely. That's like his biggest thing. I kind of feel for Josh Allen a bit, though, because I think back to that Chiefs game a couple of years ago where he had the multiple, stunning, no shot, this should have worked drives, and he kept coming up the plays and the defense slowed down. And now we sit here, and when we started this, my whole angle was going to be like, oh, well, Joe Burrow beats the Chiefs and Josh Allen doesn't. But it's not fair. Josh Allen was right there, and his team couldn't come through for him. But Joe Burrow beats the Chiefs and Josh Allen doesn't. So, it's Joe Burrow.
How much of can you say that he hasn't really had the best supporting cast around him, Josh Allen? As many weapons as Joe Burrow?
He had Steph Diggs.
Yeah, he had Stephon Diggs. I would say that if you look at the Bills and you look at the Bengals, pre those quarterbacks, both are pretty inept franchises, right? I think that's pretty fair to say. So the biggest factor in changing their fortunes and suddenly making them good are the quarterbacks themselves. So I don't know that organizationally I'm giving a great advantage either way, although I would take Chase over Diggs.
I would too, 100%. And
All right.
like I said, that wide receiver room too, and we weren't talking about Boyd like that, but he was balling too. They had 3 guys that were balling.
Let's get to the next one here. Joe Burrow or Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott was having an MVP season. I'm talking about falling apart at the end of the season into the playoffs. Dak Prescott is the poster child of that.
Yeah, it's like a cosmetic MVP, honestly. Like it was good. We watched it. I think every week we came in here and said, yeah, but what's he going to do in the postseason?
Yeah, man. It sucks,
Right.
man.
At least with Joe, even if I know the regular season doesn't look quite right, he's probably going to show up in the postseason.
Yeah, this is where you play that situational game that we were alluding to earlier. Like, don't get me wrong, Dak Prescott is better than Cowboy fans would have you believe. 90% of the NFL would love to have him as a quarterback, but if you have one guy to come up with the game-winning drive, and I can let you choose between Dak Prescott and Joe Burrow, like I don't even think it's not even close. It's not. Yeah, there's no question at this point.
Let's put him up against a young stud, shall we? And CJ Stroud. How do you think he stacks up versus CJ Stroud?
I'm going to do my bias thing. It's CJ Stroud on this one. No, seriously.
It's a very small sample size,
CJ
though.
Stroud 1-0 head-to-head against Joe Burrow and the Bengals here. I'm going to get you the stat line from that game. So Stroud went for 356 yards, a touchdown interception, but he had a game-winning drive in that game. Burrow threw for 347, 2 touchdowns, but he also threw 2 picks. CJ Stroud is a wonder kid, and he did more with less. You want to talk about what do you think Joe's going to do if you put him in that offense? And this is not a knock on Joe because I do think he's a really good quarterback, but nobody was talking about Noah Brown. Nobody's talking about Tank Dell.
No.
Nobody's talking about Nico Collins before CJ Stroud came around.
Yep.
And I think that's making the decision for me. He was phenomenal with less than great weapons around him as a rookie.
Yeah, I mean, JP, as much as it pains me, in my heart I would take Joe, but I think you make a very good objective argument. And if we were to compare their careers at the same time, since CJ Stroud's younger, look, it took Joe, he had the injury first year, but still it took him 2 years to get the Bengals to be really good. The Texans, another completely inept franchise, and yet immediately, under CJ Stroud's leadership, they all of a sudden, they felt like they were going to go on a run, maybe even deep into the playoffs last year. So, and now the future looks brighter than ever. So this is, and with Burrow, we got to be clear about this too. Like you said, what'd you call him, ouchie guy earlier?
Ouchie, yeah.
I mean, 2 of the 4 years, injuries have defined his season.
Yep.
And that sucks, and it's unlucky, and it's cruel, and it's the worst part of football.
Yep.
But it's so fascinating how quickly you can get replaced. And CJ Stroud tried to kind of slot it into that next guy up space that Burrow was in. So it's just a big year for Burrow to prove his dominance over everybody that we just mentioned. Because I'm giving a lot of benefit of the doubt coming off the injury.
Because there's a lot of quarterbacks that are stepping up, and
Yes.
young guys are coming in. CJ Stroud being one of them, really changing the narrative there. They don't make the playoffs. You gave a lot of credit to the supporting cast on that offense, but they don't make the playoffs unless they had CJ Stroud.
No,
under
I mean,
center.
CJ Stroud certainly elevated. And those guys had to make plays, right? Like, you throw the ball out there, they got to catch it, no doubt. He elevated all of those guys, and I felt like their play looked more confident because they knew they had a quarterback who could get them the rock the way they needed to get it.
It is wild the amount of slander that was thrown CJ Stroud's way during the pre-draft process.
Oh, yeah.
Question all this stuff. And then you saw him on Sundays. And not only did you see an incredible smart player making all the right choices and whatnot, but you saw a player with some balls. I mean, going for it. There was some courageous. You don't lead the NFL in yards per game unless you're willing to take some shots.
And that was my biggest question about him because he's a quieter, more mild-mannered guy. He's not always yelling up front. Dudes trust him, and they follow him, and that matters.
Well, and that was the biggest question. We were talking to Ohio State coaches when he was going to the draft. They said he's not a rah-rah guy, but he brings a lot of leadership in other ways.